Monologues. Pull those up on your screen if you haven't, if you don't know which one you're going to do. Let's see, we have 7 different ones to choose from. And we're going to go around, and I'm going to, well, probably with most classes, no more than 4 can take either one, and that'll work out well. People tend to jump on the shortest one. I would strongly go against that. As we go through these here and explain, I would probably go for the ones that you maybe can understand a little bit more than, maybe one that's a bit longer just because you understand it, or it might be easier to remember. That's what I would go with. That's just from an actor's point of view. The very first, well, first off, the monologues. You're going to be getting one today, and then you'll be presenting them, and you can look in the lesson plans to see what day that is. And obviously, if we have cancellations or we need to push things back and alter it, it'll get pushed back. But it happens at the very end of the unit, okay, right before we do the test. The way this unit works out is we have a couple weeks to go through all of the play and such, and we have a handful of days to work on a group project, and it's during that working on the group project that we present. You'll be presenting them to me up here. It's not in front of the class like a speech. This is not intended to be like a speech. As you've heard me talk in class, the most important thing is additional exposure to content. A lot of you haven't touched Shakespeare since freshman year with Romeo and Juliet. You were 14, maybe 15. Okay, now that you're 17, 18, maybe some of you are 19 now. You've grown a lot in that time, okay, and you've probably forgotten a lot in that time from your experience with Shakespeare. I strongly believe in the more times that you deal with Shakespeare, the easier it is. Now, the point of this is, have you ever heard this saying that you never truly know something until you have to teach it? Okay, that's very much so. I was like that in school with math. I never really seemed to have a great math teacher. And especially in college, I was teaching myself calculus because it was a big lecture hall and they would just go through it, and I'm like, I'm not following this. So I would have to sit down with my book and figure it out. That's a long way of doing it, but I think I understood a lot better than just being told about it. So that's the point of this Shakespeare. You're going to pick one of 7 monologues. And between now and when we present, you will learn that monologue. You can look at the rubric online. You're not going to be graded on projection. You are not graded on acting or stage presence. That's not the point. This isn't Pearson's class. This is not a class on acting. I just simply want you to be forced into a situation where you have to learn Shakespeare on your own. The rhythm, the word choice that he uses. You will see a lot of parallels between the monologue you take and what we go through in class in Macbeth. And the point being, the additional exposure to here, the additional exposure of the in-class work, hopefully it makes your experience a little bit easier to handle for those of you that struggle. I think Macbeth is one of the easier plays to understand and comprehend. However, if you are not big into Shakespeare, which I doubt many of you are, it can be a little tedious early on. I think most everybody gets relaxed as we get going through because you're used to it. You're used to it because of the additional time and exposure spent on it. And that's what the point of the monologue is. Okay? You have 2 scores underneath your Macbeth projects. That's a whole category. It's 15% of your grade. The monologue is half of that, and the other half is your group project. This is the easiest 100% you can get in this class is on this monologue. You start with 100. If you get through it without making any massive mistakes or needing my help, you're going to keep your 100. It's not about speed. It's not about your volume and all of that. I've had people go to B or not to be. That is the question. Whether it is nobler to suffer the slings and arrows, and they throw it out there, and they take their time, and they get it. They get 100. I've told you it's not an acting thing. This isn't a speech projection thing. If you need to take a moment, you take a moment. Now, if you get ridiculous, I'm going to cut you off and just grade you with what you've done. But each time you have to ask for help, each time you butcher or paraphrase, your grade starts to come down. And I'll talk more about that as we get going. But realistically, this is the easiest. I've had people rap it before. Okay? And not to present just like they just memorize it like this, to be or not to be. That is the question. You know, they memorize it that way. And so they're up here and you can see them tapping their foot as they spew it out. And totally fine. Whatever works for you. We'll spend some time in the future kind of showing you how to break down your monologues from an actor's point of view. Maybe that will help you. You know, I will provide as much assistance as I can, but this is all outside of school time for you. Okay, so this is something that you're going to have to do on your own. Most of them are 25 to 30 lines. So if you just do 2 lines a day, that literally will take you 2 minutes to memorize 2 lines. If you did a little bit each day, this will be very, very effortless. But most of you will wait until the last day or the last weekend, and you have to spend a couple hours sitting down and figuring it out. But hopefully you don't stress out, because it really isn't that hard to do. On the Moodle, I put a lot of extra help for you, a lot of resources and such. The link, Monologues, how to break it up. I went through and color-coded them. Kind of, some people are more visual. Other people like to listen to things. You know, I put audio recordings of each of these monologues, of myself reading them. If you want to listen to them as you're memorizing them, if you memorize them and then you want to hit play and try to do it along with it, that's fine. Every time I do a new show, I always record all my lines, put them on a CD, and then stick them in the car. And so then driving to and from wherever, you know, there's just to and from work, that's 30, 40 minutes a day that I can listen to it. Okay, if you want to listen to your music station, but instead of listening to the minute and a half of commercials, you can hit play on your CD and listen, unless you channel surf, which I probably would anyways. Sometimes people don't understand what you're saying. You, being that individual, not understanding what the monologue is saying. There's a link, No Fear Shakespeare, where it translates it for you into modern day. Okay, sometimes knowing what is being spoken helps. And so you can look that up. And so I gave you that link as well. I had one person who actually memorized the translation once. So don't do that. I have video clips of each of the monologues directly below the audio recordings of myself. Now those aren't video of me doing them. They're videos I've edited from movie productions. There's a couple versions of the Hamlet one there. Sometimes to see somebody visually act it out might help with your understanding. I don't know. But like Moodle, all year long, all semester long, I put out resources there for you. If you use them or not, that's up to you. Then if you look at the files at the bottom, if you want to download either the audio or the video, because otherwise you're streaming it on the upper links, if you want to download it and put it on your MP3 player or whatever, that's fine. You know, I had somebody last semester who went to the Y and was on one of the ellipticals, and she would listen to it and memorize it that way. And she goes, well, I'm going to be running for 45 minutes. I might as well listen to it. And she got almost all of it. So, you know, find times where you can use your time wisely and not waste it. So with that being said, if you look at the monologues, the first one is Mark Antony. It was from a play, Julius Caesar. You may or may not have done that your sophomore year. This is an extremely famous one. The video segment is with Marlon Brando, who was the Godfather. It's a very famous one. Julius Caesar has just been killed. Mark Antony was his right-hand man. The conspirators, you know, stabbed him in the back. Et tu, Brute, that whole thing. And they're getting ready to take over, and they've killed the dictator in the conspirators' minds. And Mark Antony was a friend of Caesar's, and he goes, do you mind if I speak at the funeral? And everybody's like, I don't know, you're pro-Caesar. And then they finally let him speak. And throughout this speech, and this is only about half of it, so within this 4-minute monologue that he has, he is able to get the crowd completely behind him and Caesar, even though Caesar's dead, and they run the conspirators out of town. But he was able to speak, and you will see in here, through reading it, that he was not allowed to speak falsely. He couldn't lie. He couldn't speak inappropriately about the conspirators at all. And so he doesn't violate his word, but yet he is such a good orator and good speaker, and his word choice was so great that he was able to convince all of Rome, who 2 minutes ago was glad that Caesar died. Now they were very vengeful that he was dead and wanted to kill the conspirators. And so it's a wonderful speech. If you look through there's a lot of lines that are repeated. So even though this might be one of the long ones, you know, there's a couple that are repeated over and over, so in essence, it's maybe one of the short ones if you were to memorize, just sheer number of lines. The second one's Hamlet, probably the most famous one, the to be or not to be. If you've seen Billy Madison, the competition at the end, that's the monologue, to be or not to be, that thing. This one's probably the most difficult in context, to live or die, to be awake or not. It's, to exist or not exist, that's the question. He's a very melancholy, very depressed individual in his play. It's a very dark play. Pretty much everybody dies at the end of his play. There was a movie that came out a couple years ago called Hamlet 2. And one of the guys from Tropic Thunder was in it, or Night at the Museum. It was funny, but the whole point is, out of all the movies ever made, Hamlet 2 is probably one that's not going to give me. It's like Titanic 2. There can't be a sequel, because in Hamlet everybody dies. So the fact that they come up with this, their take on Hamlet and come up with a sequel, it's very comical and farcical, which is interesting. So his is very in depth and very deep. So those of you who really want a challenge, that would be one. To impress your, college professors with and such. Henry V is my favorite. This is actually about half of the length that it's actually. They're getting ready to fight the French, I think, at the Battle of Agincourt, and they're outnumbered like 10,000 to 300, or just something absurd. And he rallies them up. This would be a pep talk, before a big football game or something, where we are severely outnumbered. But he says today is the Feast of Crispian. Today's date, today is February 1st, Henry's Day, make up a day, whatever. And he goes, he that outlives this day and comes safe home will stand a tiptoe when this day is named, and and everybody will be on the anniversary so happy and proud, and get everybody fired up, and they eventually go out and win. This is Henry V was a history, so it was one of the legit, not a fiction piece. So it's just a wonderful rallying cry. It's one I memorized for college and just kind of still retained over the years. But I did the full one that was about twice this long. So it's a very good one. A lot of people really enjoy that one. The Macbeth one, this is his most famous one from this play that we will read. He's getting ready to go up and attempt to murder the king. And he's pretty much dealing with, he doesn't want to do it, but his wife is pushing him, and you'll see that Lady Macbeth is really the main villain of the piece. And so she had goaded him. He had said, I don't want to do it, and then she pushes him and calls out his manhood and all of this stuff. And so he's kind of walking up the steps to go kill it, and he sees this imaginary dagger before him, dripping in blood, and that's him getting ready to go do it. So it's a really deep one. The next one is Romeo. You read this one your freshman year. It says, but soft will light through yonder window breaks. It's a very simple one. It's him infatuated with this woman, Juliet, and comparing her to all these things. Then the last two, Lady Macbeth, the sixth and the seventh one, these are two monologues as well. If you want to get a little bit of insight into these monologues, taking the Macbeth or the two Lady Macbeths, those are things that we will cover in class, so you'll get a little bit of more exposure to that, or an additional exposure than the other ones. But I think all of them definitely have their own perks and such.